All right, YouTube, if you've been paying attention to what's happening in the Netherlands, it is really funny because what happened is a bunch of Turkish immigrants there decided to hold a protest. They're in support of Ankara's policies, and they're not really that happy with the fact that the Dutch government there, has decided to bar several foreign ministers from actually making speeches to these people, literally campaigning within a country other than their own for political causes in the run-up, of course, to the Dutch election, which I believe takes place in a couple of days. At least in my time zone, of course, there across the Atlantic Ocean. About 2.5 days or thereabouts, March 15th, if I remember correctly. So, Geert Wilders, obviously, is chuckling about this because what you saw was a rather large group of people protesting and rioting, and then the Dutch police came in and dispersed them. They had to escort one foreign minister to the German border, get her out of the country. And then they prevented another from even entering in the first place. And they did this for sane reasons. You've got a rather large, angry group of people that are protesting in your country. They're immigrants. They are not, in many cases, full citizens of the country. Some of them are, and they're part of that ethnic minority. Others are recent arrivals. They're refugees, migrants, whatever it may be. And they're upset at generally Dutch policies. I'm not sure why, because they're in, sort of the God's own country area of the world where everything is quite tech literate and squeaky clean. And supposedly our politicians here want us to emulate the Netherlands and Sweden and all these countries and Germany. And yet you see this. You have fucking continuous assimilation problems, continuous alienation of the general population versus migrant groups, migrants versus the native population wherever they overlap. This is the problem with multiculturalism when you're not enforcing assimilation. This is the fundamental problem that globalism causes. Merkel loves it. She can use it as a political issue. She is a master of doing that. People like Obama and Clinton love that. They would love nothing better than to import a bunch of people, then pretend that they're their best friend. They're still screwing them, but they'll pretend that they're their best friend. Oh, yeah, I love the immigrants. Oh, I love these third worlders. Please vote for me, essentially. And that's as far as it goes, and they're going to throw them breadcrumbs at most. It's pennies and nickels to them, considering their vast fortune they're accessing of the entire tax base, and they throw a few breadcrumbs to the huddled masses, so to speak, pretend that they actually give a damn about them. This is how globalist politicians operate. So what you've seen is a little bit of chaos there right before the Dutch election. Can you say that this is going to help Geert Wilders and his party? Now, will he win? I don't know. His main opponent is the dude that's already been in office who's... It's like within some of these other countries here. Oftentimes what you've got is an establishment group is in power, still, a viable political movement. Unlike Holland's people, they've completely collapsed. Some viable political movement is the main opposition of some upstart movement. We've seen this in the UK, of course, with the Brexit stuff. That was being championed by UKIP and some defecting conservatives, but the mainstream, like Labour movement, completely opposed it. They've gotten completely crushed. They're now falling down towards minor party status along with the Liberal Democrats there, which is a good thing. Now, that's good for the UK long term if Labour there completely dies out. They obviously don't care about the average British worker any more than Merkel cares about the average refugee or economic migrant, except for political reasons. In the Netherlands, though, the Netherlands are not generally known as a flashpoint of tension and violence. The Dutch are known as an extremely laid-back culture. Sort of Germans minus the Wehrmacht or something like that, essentially. Very liberal, very tolerant and open. You've got illegal prostitution and people smoking weed and doing mushrooms and stuff. And that's sort of what the Netherlands are really known for. However, then you've got this shit going on. Even the most peaceful of cultures, you get a very pacifistic, very passive, very, very intelligent, tolerant, politically inclusive culture. Doesn't really have a lot of enemies. They're not warmongers. They're not really doing anything wrong. They get a bunch of people that come in They do not assimilate, and then you get problems. Then you don't have that peaceful culture anymore. And here's a warning. When we look back at history, when the otherwise very peace-loving people of Europe get pushed too far by outside groups, world wars tend to happen, or some other major pogrom or purge tends to happen. The European Union, if it wants to not see Europe literally torn apart with infighting, should probably just fucking get ready to dissolve and not care too much, not put up too much opposition to the populists there. The populists will reabsorb, assimilate these groups largely, other than deporting maybe criminals or something like that, people who never get a job. And then all will be peaceful again within Europe. It's possible to do that, to resist it further. If Le Pen loses, Wilders loses, the Brexit continues to stall and all of these things, if they continue putting up, in many cases, dishonest opposition to otherwise good ideas, they're going to get worse parties rising up in Europe, and there will be nothing that they can do to stop them, trust me. That historically tends to be the case. It's not like they can militarize further and just violently suppress all these movements, because it'd be Europe-wide, it'd be kind of difficult to do. And they'd be aided, honestly, the Eastern Europeans would probably aid them. I thought it was really amusing to see Erdogan, who acts like a mini dictator at this point anyway. He's basically destroyed the country's constitution and taken them back to the Ottoman times. He's ripped apart as many of the liberal reforms of Ataturk as he can. He is now complaining that the Dutch are Nazis. He says, oh, these Nazis over there forced the foreign minister out. Yeah, because your foreign minister was sent in to conduct propaganda immediately before a major political campaign in the country of the Netherlands. Well, all of these immigrant groups there, they're not really part of the Dutch culture that are there. They're not. Some of them have assimilated fully. They're probably not the ones protesting right now. These people are calling for, oh, pro-Turkey this, admit Turkey to the EU, free movement, more Turks needed, and so forth. And there are a lot of people in Europe who don't agree with that. I say it's not even really about a bunch of, academic liberal Turks moving into your country. It's not really the problem. The other main problem is that Erdogan is holding 3 million refugees that he's got in Turkey that aren't Turks over the heads of people in Europe. That's what he's been doing. Oh yeah, I might have to let these people across the border if you don't give us more concessions in our EU talks, essentially. I think that's pissed off more people. At the same time that Erdogan talks about, oh, these fascists destroying democracy, destroying this, that, and destroying freedom, he's done that in Turkey. That's point number one. It needs to be understood. Erdogan has essentially destroyed Turkish liberal democracy. It no longer exists. It is now an Islamic caliphate under the control of Erdogan. He is now the new sultan of the New Wave Ottoman Empire. He's seeking to expand. They'll probably go imperialist mode whenever they get the chance to do so. They'll straddle NATO and the EU on one side and Russia on the other like they're doing. It's the lead up to a bloody conflict in which they're going to make some excuse. Erdogan's going to make some excuse to invade Syria. And he's going to kill tens of thousands of his own people doing so. And the Turks need to understand this too. He's going to slaughter your people too. Your soldiers are going to get shot at. It's not going to be enjoyable. It's not romantic. It's not fun. It's not, oh, the boys marching through the desert. Oh, what brave young Boy Scouts or something like that. No, it's gritty and dirty. And when you get shot and die, you tend to empty your bowels immediately, and the battlefield smells like shit and piss more than it does anything else. And they'll be burning oil wells and burning tanks and all that crap around there. He's probably going to do that at some point. He'll manufacture a reason to invade Syria. Oh, we got to restore order. We've got kind of the backing of Russia. We're in NATO. Who's going to stop us? Nobody is. So we're going to march in. We'll restore order. They're going to take a swath of Syria, maybe a swath of Iraq. What are we going to do about it? They're in NATO. Are we going to kick them out of NATO, move them further towards Russia? Turkey is in a slightly enviable position diplomatically right now. But now they're overstretching in regards to Western Europe, because they're attempting to lord the fact that there are millions of people of Turkish extraction living in, working in, sometimes having fully immigrated into the Western European system. They're taking advantage of that for political leverage, just as they're doing with the refugees. How can we say that Erdogan is a good person when he says, "Oh, look at these refugees. Oh, come on into Turkey. Yeah, we'll put you in these little shelters and we'll feed you and stuff." And then we find out Turkish soldiers often are raping these refugees. We're finding out that some of them are getting shot for either trying to go back across the border or trying to move around within Turkey. And then, of course, we find out the only reason he wanted them there in the first place is so that he could extract tribute from the Merkelites, number one, and lord it over all of Europe, number two. Oh, yeah, I'll crash some random country in Europe by letting 3 million people leave this country and go right across the Bosphorus. I'll let them migrate into Europe if you don't give me concessions. And they gave him some of those concessions. And they think that they staved off disaster by doing so. But the refugees are still there. What happens the next time he does this? Are you going to give him more concessions? Say, oh yeah, Turkey can be in the EU. Well, then you've just screwed yourself because now they definitely do have free movement. Now Turkey definitely can let them in, doesn't even need to give you an excuse for it. Oh yeah, go around. You can go wherever you want. You're in the EU now. Turkey's in the EU. Now Turkey's not even part of Europe. Part of it is the far western side along the Aegean Ocean up through the Bosphorus, Istanbul and so forth, at least maybe as far as Ankara. Yeah, it's liberal, but Erdogan is destroying that. That's the point. Erdogan has taken a country that was half European essentially, and really not that distinguishable from Greece or some of these other cultures, obviously not in a religious or a linguistic sense, but as far as the social and political sense was very much keyed into that liberalism, held it as a tradition, as apart from the rest of the Middle East, which is theocratic generally speaking. He's taken that in only a few years. I can no longer say, oh, well, Turkey's the, when people talk about Israel being the only democracy in the Middle East, it's actually Turkey. I could say that a couple years ago. I can't say that anymore because it'd no longer be true. Erdogan's pissed it away. And now he's trying to infiltrate these European cultures to send his ministers out to conduct propaganda before their elections there because he's terrified the EU will fall apart before Turkey can join it. And Nigel Farage spoke of this. He spoke of the fact that there were active plans by many of these people to admit them to the European Union, to admit Turkey. Now, if you admit Turkey to the EU, I have a feeling that a lot of people in Europe really don't care if a bunch of liberals from Izmir end up with free movement throughout Europe. And that's probably not what they're concerned about. No, I think what they're concerned about are tens of millions of Islamic hardliners on the other side of the country, along the Iraqi border, the Iranian border, into that region. I think those are the folks that are worrisome to some people in Western Europe. And I think Bill Maher, once again, is the only sane liberal because he's the only one who's willing to call out Islamofascism. Now, the average westernized Turk is not an Islamofascist. They'd be shy of a moderate Muslim. Our government says that a Muslim who just watches beheadings is a moderate Muslim, which is a total lie. That's not moderate Islam, that's Islamofascism light. The true moderates that are there, nobody fucking cares. That's not worrisome. The problem is Erdogan, Tayyip himself, the dictator of Turkey, which is at this point what he is attempting to destroy the trappings of liberalism and democracy there, crack down on social freedom, absorb as much press freedom as possible, militarize the country further, and then do this sort of crap. That's the problem. So Geert Wilders is overjoyed that this is happening a few days before the election. Erdogan severely overstretched. He forced the actual standing government, the people that are opposing Wilders right now in his party, are the ones that now have to literally crack down on this protest and expel foreign ministers from Turkey and then get called Nazis. Oh, what a surreal timeline we're living in when this is what happens, because the party holding power there is not it's a leftist party, center left to moderately liberal, as opposed to Geert Wilders, who they claim is far right. They claim he's a Nazi. If Erdogan thinks that the standing government of the Netherlands, liberal as they are, welfare friendly and foreigner friendly as they are Nazis, what do they think about Geert Wilders? They must think that he's worse than Hitler. They think that he's been red-pilled beyond Hitler, and now he's something else. He's some sort of super transformative, head Aryan or something like that. That's what they must think of them at this point. Honestly, the one thing about Geert Wilder is I wish he would change his hair because it looks a lot like David Brock. And of course, that's not a good place to be. It looks a little bit like a teenage Stalin, actually. Interestingly enough, yeah, compare them. Teenage Stalin had the same weird sort of pseudo Einstein hair. Um, yeah, I know that's not exactly a political issue, but it's just something that irks me when I see these people from time to time. It's funny to see foreign ministers sent from a non-EU state into the EU, deep into the EU, like the core of the EU, to go conduct propaganda among immigrant groups there to try to stir up trouble right before an election. I don't know who greenlighted it. Was it Erdogan or somebody else in his government? I guess he just wanted a chance to call people that may not always agree with Merkel Nazis or something like that. Yes, okay. Everyone's a Nazi these days. Everyone's Adolf Hitler. That's about all.